Alrighty, good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Baer, and I'm an event facilitator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, and that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Aninilwak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, as well as the homeland of the Red River Métis. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. And of course, we are gathered to celebrate the launch of two new books from Radiant Press, Into the Dark by David Elias and Honeydew by Ben Zalkind. So tonight, you're going to hear reading from both writers and hear more about the books themselves during a conversation hosted by Ron Robinson. And of course, following the conversation, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. So if you are here tonight and you have a question, just raise your hand a little bit enough for me to see you, and I'll come by with this wireless microphone. That's only to ensure that you're heard on tonight's live stream for the cameras that are over here. We do trust you to project, just more so for those at home. But for now, I have the pleasure of introducing your host for the evening, as well as our two writers. Taller on radio, host Ron Robinson is the former host of the weekend morning show on CBC Radio in Manitoba. He and his wife, Carol, can be heard together on the cleverly named Saturday Morning Show. And Ron can be heard on his own hosting Pages Radio for readers on CKUW-FM 95.9 from the University of Winnipeg. A longtime book reviewer for the Winnipeg Free Press, he was a founding partner of McNally Robinson Booksellers and facilitates the Mystery Book Club for the store. David Elias is the author of several books, most recently, The Truth About the Barn by Great Plains Press, which was featured in the Winnipeg Free Press as one of the top titles for 2020. His most recent work of fiction is a historical novel, Elizabeth of Bohemia by ECW Press, a finalist for the Margaret Lawrence Award for Fiction at the Manitoba Book Awards. And his previous works have been up for numerous awards, including the McNally Robinson Book of the Year, the Amazon First Novel Award, and the Journey Prize. His writing has appeared in literary magazines and anthologies across the country, and he also spends time as a mentor, creative writing instructor, and editor. He lives in Winnipeg. And Ben Zalkind is a novelist and physician living in Calgary. In an adventurous past life, he made a spirited but ultimately futile effort to avoid STEM, which led to graduate degrees in literature and psychology and well-meaning forays into journalism, mental health research, and some fairly exotic corners of government bureaucracy. As a student, Ben studied with a number of esteemed authors, including Elizabeth Crane, Francois Camoin, and Nick, I hope I can pronounce this right, Nick Pizzolatto? Perfect. The creator of the HBO series True Detective, which is why I wanted to get that right, who each in their own way shaped his writing journey. A Salt Lake City native and naturalized Western Canadian, Ben has lived all over Canada and the US. He's happiest outdoors where he can cycle, drink coffee, and adventure with his wife and fellow traveler. Honeydew is his debut novel. And then up to read first, lovely, that's going to be David, everyone. Thank you.
Hear me okay? Well, thanks everybody for coming. And I've got a few thank yous to give out to some people, Ron for hosting, Ben for joining me in this evening. Radiant Press for taking on this project. And I feel like I got to mention somebody, the late Jeffrey Ursel. I don't know if you know that name, but he used to be the publisher of Coteau Books in Saskatchewan. And this, I guess I have to go back up a little because this manuscript has been around for a while. It kind of took the scenic route getting here. And quite some time ago, Jeffrey got a look at this manuscript, and he did an extensive, in-depth, deep dive edit of this book for no benefit of his that I could think of. He just did it out of the goodness of his heart, and I never forgot that. And so I think he deserves mention. And also Marjorie Anderson, who also did an in-depth editorial analysis of this book. Yeah, so I've got people that I'm very thankful for the time they took. My last book was a COVID launch. The truth about the barn. So it's been a while since I've done a live launch. I remember the last launch I did that was a live launch here. I remember that I don't remember feeling, how am I going to put this? I don't remember feeling old. But I could feel it a little bit in this one. It's just time has definitely passed from 2019 till now. Whatever that means. So I'm just going to start at the beginning of the book and read for just a few minutes. Oh, I forgot to mention the card. I've never received a card quite as nice from any of the publishers of the books that I've done before as this one. Just a lovely card, very nice commentary inside, and the cover. Deborah, she took the time to do sort of a collage of characters and props from the book. Very extremely thoughtful, and I just thought. I mean, she even found a picture of Jack Ruby. For some people, you know who that is. Some of you won't. But anyway, I thought that was pretty tremendous. Right. Chapter 1. Clarence Martens bent forward to pick up the heavy hammer that lay across the top of the anvil, annoyed at the way his fingers stiffened again, resisted his efforts to curl them around the handle. He turned the hand up to stare into the network of thick, fibrous tissue that had spread across the sheath of his palm and fingers, bunched itself up into tumor-like nodules. It had started out as an unexplained indentation in the palm of his hand, a pinprick that looked as though he might have jabbed himself with a nail. But over time, it became the center of a vortex that gathered up the surrounding skin, corrupted the nerves and muscles, until his hand began to resemble a claw. Clarence tried again, willed his fingers to spread wider until his hand could grasp the hammer, then picked up a large set of tongs with the other to hold the curved length of steel in place over the top of the end. He raised the hammer high and struck a blow, turned the piece with the tongs, struck again, then again, before lifting it off to examine it. He laid down the hammer and picked up a welding clamp, leaned forward to position the steel against the elaborate metallic construction before him. He moved the steel a few inches one way, then another, up a little, down, jerked his head forward with a quick motion and flipped the welding mask over his face. When he tapped the rod against the steel, a corona of sparks shot into the surrounding gloom. Each one launched out of a tiny white hot sun that split the jagged contours of the shop into naked light and impenetrable shadow. He began in earnest, moving the rod expertly, creating an orange ridge of beaded molten steel, while the arc welder groaned and buzzed in even rhythms. He'd been spending most of his nights out in the shop lately, coming to bed later, getting up earlier. Tonight, as he had lain next to Rose, waiting for sleep that wouldn't come, he'd wondered whether she might be lying awake the same as he was, breathing rhythmically, eyes open in the dark, not saying anything. He heard her sigh. The idea of that. of the two of them lying side by side, pretending to be asleep, sharing the space of the bed, the air, the dark, the small noises of the night. He thought he detected a small intake of breath, a rustle of soft hair on the pillow. Then a terrible paralysis seized him, that he must break the silence, say something, anything, that he must not. He drifted into a state of consciousness where megrims flitted about, appeared and disappeared like fireflies, until they fused into a rare and brilliantly colored bird perched on a high, thin branch of logic. He might have slept for a time then, but he woke with a start, embroiled in the maelstrom of a wildly complex idea that buzzed his brain like a crazed moth, hissed into the embers of a fire there, and startled him back into wakefulness. He rushed back out to the shop to try and give it some kind of shape. But he was through with this piece now. He reached over, brought down a block and tackle, the same one that he used to use to roll hitches and gates and other pieces of custom work, and he hooked the sculpture up to it and pulled on the chain till it stiffened and used all his weight to lift the steel creature into the air. Then he slid the block and tackle along the overhead track to the front of the shop. He worked the chains in reverse until the piece came to rest on the worn boards of a tattered stone boat. As he pulled the big sliding doors wide, he took little notice of the day's overcast, a misty rain sifting coldly out of a gray sky. The giant cottonwoods stood bare, their fallen leaves forming a porous ochre blanket over the grass, still green beneath. An early frost had killed the gardens and orchards, and the musty aroma of decay hung in the air. But as Clarence climbed up onto the tractor, started it, backed it into the shop to hitch up the stone boat, he remained oblivious to it all. He pulled ahead slowly and made his way across the yard. By the time he reached the street, people had begun to appear in the doorways of summer kitchens and grain sheds and come to stand under the naked cottonwoods along the road, eager to witness the arrival of this latest aberration. He climbed down off the tractor and tied a length of chain to the sculpture and fastened the other end to a fence post. And then he got back on the polished steel seat of the tractor and pulled away with a jerk that made the chain snap as the stone boat slipped out from underneath. In all of this, Clarence gave no hint of acknowledgement to the onlookers, nor to the sculpture that tottered a little before it settled into place. He returned to the yard, got off the tractor, bent to unhitch the stone boat, and then allowed himself a quick glance at the kitchen window. Rose was at the counter, looking back out at him. She was holding a yellow dish above the sink, holding it very tightly in both hands. Water dripped from the bottom of the dish in small, quick drops down into the sink. Odd that she should hold the wet dish there for so long instead of setting it aside on the rack. He threw the chain down onto the stone boat noisily, took hold of the sliding door to the shop, and he pulled it across the width of the open doorway in short, jerky increments. Just before he shut out the final sliver of gray light, he allowed himself one last look at Rose, still there at the kitchen counter, standing in just the same way, the plate still in her hands, holding it up like a plaque, a mirror for her to peer into. If what Clarence had created failed to please him, if any sense of intimacy with this last work quickly vanished, still a nagging moral imperative remained. He must try again. The new work was all but certain to be a failure. Its carefully crafted contours and lines, a sad approximation of what he had set out to create. Another testament to his defeat. He was sure of it. And yet, He could not stop.
Okay, that's good. I'd like to echo David's thank yous. A big thank you to David and to Ron and to McNally Robinson for having me, for letting me come out and share my book with you. And a big thank you to Deborah and John and everyone at Radiant Press, and for taking a chance on my book and helping to bring it into the world. And so thank you, Deborah, thank you, John, and I'll see you tomorrow. And so I'm going to read a section from a little bit later in the book. And so this is the introduction of our dastardly antagonist, Moses Honeydew. And my protagonists are present. They're at a rally that Honeydew is hosting for himself. And he's unveiling his grand new project. Suddenly, an especially thunderous rumble rippled through the amphitheater, stunning the audience. The din crescendoed into a textured, polyphonous roar, like 1,000 meteors crashing into a full parking lot. In the center of the stage, a cool blue submersible with a chrome drill affixed to its nose rocketed out from a pile of boulders, which disintegrated into foam pebbles on impact. The crowd cheered as a gull-wing door folded itself into the roof, and out stepped Moses Honeydew in an electric blue earth suit. His sandy brown hair was parted to the side, and his unusually small teeth were on full display in a smile verging on rictus. He hugged his helmet against an outer thigh with a cavalier wrist. "I made it!" he shouted in his thin, froggy voice, which was amplified by an unseen microphone. "Hello, friends." The crowd leapt to its feet and cheered their idol. "Wow, what a show of support. Look at you guys." He shook his head in what appeared to be a gesture of humility. "I really am lucky." He jogged over to the magma stream and dipped a shining blue gloved hand into the burbling orange sludge. "These gloves can withstand temperatures of 4,000 degrees Celsius." He winked at the audience. "Don't worry, this isn't real magma." With an awkward twist, he flicked his wrist toward the front rows, showering them with black-streaked orange foam. "It's tangerine flavored," he shouted. "Give it a try." A triumphant techno chorale piped from the lofted speakers. This roused the audience to its collective feet. Honeydew began to skip across the stage in his form-fitting earth suit. He reached his hands into the sky and began to clap. His admirers mimicked his loose, awkward gestures, hands above heads. Part of the audience periodically missed, synchronizing with Honeydew. "Yeah, let's get this party started," he continued, somewhat breathless now. Strobe lights bathed the entrepreneur in fluorescent, ethereal oranges and yellows. He popped and locked to the center of the stage, where one of his arms evidently broke down. Fortunately, in his other, he grasped an invisible oil can, which he used to lubricate his metal joints. "Okay," he bellowed in pantomimed exhaustion. "Geez, I've got to get on the old treadmill," he said with an effete giggle. "My friends, I'm going to journey deep into Earth's crust. If luck is on my side, I might even break through to the mantle." The audience roared with approval. "The Russians couldn't do it," he taunted. "And for Pete's sake, our own government can't be bothered to drill anymore. How am I going to do it, you ask? Well, today, here in Bonneville, an enlightened city if you ask me, I'll tell you what we've got planned." He jogged over to the submersible and patted the elegant, sloping contour of its teardrop-shaped body, which led seamlessly into a thick-grooved drill bit. "Look at this baby. All state-of-the-art substrate technology developed in-house. It's got slow-burn fuel cells hafnium carbonitrate coating, the works. We're calling it the Hansbach. Honeydew raised an eyebrow at someone off stage. She scurried over, and he handed her the helmet he pinioned against his thigh in a bravura astronaut posture. He mopped perspiration from his hairless upper lip with a glossy blue sleeve. You know, he said, not everyone's excited about what we've been up to. The crowd booed and hissed. He raised a placating hand and bowed his humble head. I know, he continued. Not everyone agrees that the time is now for such an undertaking, but I haven't asked for anything from anyone. Substrate has been self-reliant as always, and we don't have an army of lazy, overpaid government bureaucrats to slow us down. We did it the Substrate way. We did it the Honeydew way, and we'll live stream the whole thing. Again, the crowd erupted in pandemonium. Rose nudged her 3 minions, who were leaning over the railing, transfixed. They pushed themselves to seated positions and surreptitiously swung around their small backpacks. No words were spoken, not even a signal given. A few furtive glances passed between Rose and the young trio, who had practiced what was to come next a half dozen times the evening before. So what do we need from you? Honeydew asked the air. We need your support. You're the engine that drives Substrate's progress, and we've never forgotten that. So sing our praises from the rooftops. Prop us up on social media. Follow us on Quidnunc in Motion. Hell, write to your local Congress people and tell them you support what we're doing. Don't let old stuffed suits tell us what the future ought to look like. We can do it better, guys. Substrate's got what it takes. The 4 subversives dug into their backpacks with nervous, twitching fingers. They unzipped the vinyl and opened their lunch boxes fully to allow themselves full range of movement. A pair of nitrile gloves was balled up at the bottom of each of their floppy packs. With as little motion as they could manage, they pulled them over their fingers and up to their wrists. And we've done it all, Honeydew continued, his froggish voice pinched with the exertion of shouting. Who made space tourism possible? And who built the Agora district in downtown Bonneville with robot rickshaws, stop signs that give you directions, and tons of brand spanking new jobs? You did, the crowd shouted. Honeydew, honeydew, honeydew. The nerd emperor in the electric blue earth suit thrust his gloved hands in the air. But you didn't come here to hear me boast like a proud dad about all the great stuff my Ace Substrate employees have done. You want the swag. He turned to meet a young woman, handing him a t-shirt cannon, and one-handed, he aimed the translucent bazooka at one of the balconies. The audience whipped toward the target in unison. A small boy, clutching his mother's neck, took the balled-up fabric square in the face. The crowd leapt to its feet and laughed at the child's misfortune. But with his mother's prodding, the boy held up the extra-large Substrate logoed shirt, his eyes wet with tears. God, you almost knocked that kid out, Liz said to Rose. Let's do it now. Rose nudged the other 2 with a surreptitious elbow. Vashti blinked her assent. Barnabas's lips peeled back to reveal crowded, straight teeth like little cinder blocks. And just as they had practiced, they each withdrew from their lunchboxes a tightly packed ball of Substrate topsoil. The soft black shreds were speckled with bits of orange and gold and white, which adhered nicely into a sphere with the heft and texture of clay. They waited until the audience simmered and people settled into their translucent fold-up seats. Then the foursome shot to their feet. They had one vanishingly slight chance of this thing working, they knew. In a fluid, synchronized motion, they withdrew their hands from their backpacks and loosed their missiles with the full force of their overhand strength. Vashti's loose cluster disaggregated into a shower of damp clumps which fell onto the heads of the audience below. Liz's struck the railing before her, bisecting the oblong hunk and sending its hemispheres falling lamely into the cup holder of an unlucky patron. Rose, the once all-province women's softball catcher, splattered the stage with ersatz mud, some of which polluted the faux magma flows with bits of calico grit. It was a good throw, but this was Barnabas's golden moment. He unfurled his long, ungainly arm and liberated his projectile with impressive force. It whizzed through the air and stayed intact, rocketing toward its mark with a sniper's accuracy. It caught Honeydew flush in the Substrate insignia painted on the chest of his earth suit. The moment of impact dilated in Liz's perception. The sting of her failure to launch gave way to a thrill of glory. Honeydew's arms splayed out and he let out a guttural grunt. His boyish face contorted into a mask of fear. The assembled gasped in concert.
Thank you. Thank you to both our readers. And I've got some questions for David. And then we'll go back to Ben. And then I think we've got a couple of questions for the both of you can answer. And I promised not to ask, what is your favorite color? And I've also promised, where do you get your ideas from? So we're expecting you have better questions than that too. All right. Well, David, that opening is ferocious, of course, as is the book. And there's a fire that runs through the book, a separate storyline, you might say. And yet as I read, I began thinking, well, fire can burn away the dross. So what is important is revealed. Do you have that thought in mind at all? Or?
I think I might have, especially in the, there's a scene where the ark burns up. And I had quite a good time reading that scene, actually. Describing these big 4x8 sheets of plywood sort of floating through the air like magic carpets on fire. And yeah, so I mean, in a kind of roundabout way, there's something about fire, the purifying aspects of fire, no question about it. It's there in the book, absolutely.
Burns away the dross. Well, if I saw somewhere else, someone hadn't paid enough attention and they simply called it dark. But if you look closely, you'll see the D/arc. It's in the title as well. I want to talk a bit about the cover and the image, because there are a number of, you heard the mention of Jack Ruby, so the reference to the Kennedy assassination there. And we always hear about the photographs and the range of, and that comes in the book as well. Magazine pictures as well. And the one that struck me most strongly is this one. You have to be maybe my age to recognize the test pattern. I am so old, we used to watch the test pattern. Now, it isn't quite this test pattern though. And you can tell the age has changed because I'm telling you, it was a, quote, Indian head in profile with a full headdress. So what did you have in mind in terms of photographs, images? Am I making this up?
Well, I mean, the test pattern was it was an iconic image that anybody our age would have a very vivid memory of. When the day's television programming was over, they played the national anthem.
Yes. If we were still up and my dad was with us, we had to stand up when they played the national anthem. Sorry.
Yeah, and then well, there was something about that test pattern, and you could watch it, and then you'd be like, why am I watching it? Okay, I'm still watching. Why am I still watching this test pattern?
Well, it's hypnotic, and it comes out in the book because there are two boys. There are many different storylines here. We're not going to cover them all. Two boys are locked into daily TV. And it occurred to me, that's like before the computer and games and the like, our childhood, if it had been on the air 24 hours a day, we would have watched the TV 24 hours a day. And your two boys are locked into American television. And when I was a boy, remember there was KCND and then CKND, just across the border from us there. So yeah, so there's that. And the other thing I want to say before we turn to Ben, there's a ferociousness here. I must admit, the two characters that I would like to meet and would like to know more about is Martha and Rose. These are sisters, are they not?
They're friends.
Friends, but they're from two different worlds now. So talk a little bit about each of them.
Well, Martha is older, and she has been raised very traditional, what I call a folk society.
Well, it's communal rather than break away on your own.
Exactly. I mean, when I think of a folk society, and shared values, customs, food, dress, the whole 9 yards. But I mean, every year she makes a point. She happened to inherit a house she can live in and a car, and that was actually explained in a previous book how that came about.
So you'll have to read the previous book.
And so she can get away, and she does get away. She has to get away. She has to get out for a while because it's just too much for her. And so when she leaves, ideally she would like Rose to come with her.
Well,
but there's a lot of subtext there. You'd have to read the book. Why that's not really going to work. And so the relationship between them is it's quite nuanced, and there's a lot of unspoken stuff going on. There's a lot of subtext that the two of them even can't really talk about. So you were talking about images. So that they can share. So when Martha goes on her yearly trip, and in this case she happens to end up in Dallas, Texas, on a particular date and time when the Kennedy assassination happens to be right there in front of her.
So we're talking November 1963.
And she has a camera, and she takes photographs of what she sees. And so her thing that she's always done year after year, she goes on her trip, she comes back, she has her own darkroom, she devotes the pictures, and she shares them with Rose. And that's one of the things they can do together, and just have that there for the two of them to share. But in this case, she's got an issue because she has pictures of the most horrific moments of the Kennedy assassination that she's developed. And so part of the story is, where does she go with that? What does she do with it? And what will Rose think about what's
Well, there's a great search for meaning in each of your characters in this book. There are no jokes.
I thought the Martens brothers were kind of funny.
They have their moments. Are we talking about the TVs?
Yeah, when they're watching the TV,
That's true.
and Corny and Jake. Corny doesn't really get it, right? Corny doesn't really understand it.
What am I seeing here? And what is this?
Yeah. Why is that man holding that saucer under his cup? He looks like a sissy doing that.
Yes.
And Jake says, well, that's because it's probably in the script. It probably says, man holds cup under, saucer under cup. So there's all this banter back and forth between. I thought it was a bit of comedy relief. I thought I had to throw it.
I'll take that back. But I still think ferocious came to mind several times. And
it's not a beach book.
No. And there were once or twice I thought of Maud Lewis. Maud Lewis, the artist who was somewhat dismissed, but I don't want to give anything more away. You're going to read the book, so I'll say no more about that. But I have questions for Ben. Because my hand was running this over, it's raised. And there's a bit of the Olympics here, a bit of the Olympics on the front cover just occurred to me, which is an image we do remember. I couldn't help but we could be sued, of course, but when you said Honeydew, I kept thinking of Honeywell. Like, I'm sorry about that. We don't want to blame Honeywell if they don't belong. But there's a huge capitalist monolith at work here. And what we have is young people who think there's got to be more to life than the gig economy. And I thought I was going to ask you, was that from research, or did you, when I look at the range of things you have done, have you been through the gig economy?
Kind of. I would say the proto-gig economy. So in the mid to late aughts, I did a lot of, I cobbled together an income doing a lot of different things. And I actually feel quite fortunate that I avoided what is now kind of a hellscape people really struggle to escape from. But no, I don't have experience with what the gig economy has become.
Well, your main character, Rose, does. That's
She
Rose
does,
Gold.
yes.
Tell us a bit more about Rose. She has a sense of humor, and you could knock her down when she gets right back up.
Yeah, so in the book, numerous characters remark that Rose Gold can do anything. And she's something of a factotum. She has done whatever it's taken to make ends meet. She can repair airplane engines. She's worked in every warehouse in the city.
Trouble with your heating system?
She's an HVAC guru. And she, even though she's beleaguered, she just kind of keeps going. And in the book, she has her livelihood taken away from her very early on. So that's in the very first chapter. And so she has to figure out what to do next. And she decides to visit an old boss who's involved in some sort of unsavory things, but he's a good egg.
Don't always leave them wanting more. There's a reason why Salome had 7 veils. But I would like to say that, as with Rose, and you're up against and you want to see something change. So what should we do? Should we? You'll see sometimes politicians get a pie in the face, right? That used to be funnier than it is now. You know, when someone shoots off part of your ear, perhaps it took a different tone to it as well. But you can join with others, go looking for others. What are we going to do? Should we do something illegal, or could we change consciousness? Is this a possibility? Or should we just take to the streets?
Are you asking me?
Well, how about you as author in the book?
That's an excellent question. I think in the book, the message is that we all have our different ideas, but there's a long history of things that have worked very well. And they don't have to necessarily be involve taking to the streets, although that happens sometimes, but coming together, talking to other people, even if you disagree with them, making plans that involve more than 2 or 3 people or 1 person getting off the computer.
A sidebar from this, though, reminded me that, and I don't want to give anything away at the end of the book, too, so I have to phrase this carefully, but you don't have to put someone in jail to slow them down. Joseph Skorvetsky was in Czechoslovakia, and he found that the government could sort of take away his work bit by bit. And if you can't earn a living, what am I going to do? Especially what you knew and loved. And as well, he found that his friends and those who knew him no longer wanted anything to do with him. You were bad news. To be associated with you could result in you also losing work, etc., etc. And I was in Prague when Joseph Skorvetsky came back to Prague, and you'll be happy to know this, boys, he was able finally to get the royalties from his books. Now, he and his wife came to Toronto, and he taught English there, and they set up their own publishing firm. So they found something else to do with other authors, and they would smuggle the books back in. 68 publishers, but his widow just died just a month or 2 ago. So here's a case of, what can we do? Shall we quit? Shall we raise our fists? Shall we just go to jail? Do we look for martyrdom? So he managed to avoid that, and the results, well, they were publishing Václav Havel and sort of bootlegging it back in. So I don't want to give away anything more. Now, question for both of you. The first thing is, there's bound to be a struggling author in the audience. And they're saying, how do I get published? Well, can you give us one tip from your years of blood, sweat, tears that might help?
Well, I think you have to, what would be the word? You have to have a certain level of audacity.
Just belief in yourself?
Well, I'm not, see, that's why I'm not sure that's the word I want to go with. It's an audacity that I'm just, I've decided that I want to do this thing, and I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm just going to keep at it. Because if you don't have stomach for it, well, then you really made a bad career choice, because it's going to hurt. Right?
Well, as in career choice, when I was a bookseller, 5,000 copies was a bestseller in Canada. What is the population of Canada today, gentlemen?
37 million.
Well, hopefully 10,000 is a bestseller now. What are the rest of the country doing? So there's that. I was going to say Grantland Rice used to be a sports writer, and he said he used to stare at the page until little drops of blood appeared on his forehead. And then he'd get at it. And
Well,
so
that's,
often,
there's a variation on that, is it's easy to do. You just, you sit down at your typewriter or computer.
Yep.
When you're gonna start your day, right, as a novelist, you sit down, you get everything in order, and then you open a vein.
or it doesn't get done until you get at it. You literally write, start, instead of putting it all on from your head. So thoughts on tip? I mean, here's your first novel.
These are all great thoughts. I think what I would say is just write every single day. I know it's a cliche.
No.
Sit, stare at the screen, bleed if you need to, but just write and keep writing and then keep writing, keep writing. And when you finish, write something else. And for me, that discipline has been very important, just to keep writing. And I have a quota every time I sit down to the computer, and I basically shackle myself to the desk. And if I don't get that quota, I can't leave.
You have a quota, a number?
A word quota.
Yes,
Usually
write so many words a day.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And I can't leave until I do that. And I hold myself to it. And sometimes I have to go to work. And it's like, you have 300 words, you said you were gonna do 500.
What about someone else in your family who'd like some time with you?
This is very early in the morning.
Right. Well, I can think of a number of authors who used to bang away before they went to work. And you've got to set it aside, I guess, if it's going to happen at all. All right?
I used to do some of that at work.
Now, those are the kind of jobs to have, I suppose.
When I was teaching. Yeah, there would be the odd time when, the pressure was on for one reason or another, and it would be like, okay, study period.
But
I would actually be doing some writing.
But if you
Right in
haven't,
the classroom.
if you haven't make the time, it won't happen, obviously.
Yeah.
Life is what we're doing while you're doing other things, right? And it's past. So if you don't get to it when you get at it, you won't get to it to get at it again. Stomping Tom Collars. Yeah. Leave that as that. All right.
But you're making a good point. But I think there's a deeper aspect to it. Is why the heck do you want to put yourself through that? Like, what is motivating you to do that kind of thing? What is it you want?
Well, you could do theater, you could do this. There's all kinds of ways of expressing yourself, but I thought the word driven is what I was looking for. But how do you feel if you don't write?
That's a good question.
I mean, you got to clench, or you blame?
But we both, are you a full-time physician?
Yes, yeah.
So you've got your hands full just with that.
Yes, but writing is a priority. So I set aside time in the early hours of the morning when it's dark like that, and I write. Although in Calgary, in 6 o'clock, 6:30 on June 20th, it's bright and sunny, so that's nice. But I was going to remark on what David said, and that is the other aspect of it is there is still magic when you sit down to write. It still can be joyous. I mean, I talk about it as a grind sometimes, but that's the other motivator, I think, to answer your question is maybe once a week, twice a week, I'll have a session that's really beautiful and something comes out and I'm really happy, and that sustains me through the slogs where I'm like, okay, this is 500 words, 400 I'm gonna need to cut, so the magic of it.
I spent an evening with Ian Rankin when he came to town. We were at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and his wife was his first reader. And I remember thinking, that's putting your marriage at risk, I think. So who was your first reader?
It is my wife, yeah. It's my wife.
She's smiling.
But it's important because she tells me right away if I'm on the right or wrong track.
So does
There's
my
no filter, no filter.
For radio, I used to do CBC, and so my wife would listen to the entire show, and she would say, "You forgot to backsell that song at 6:30. You did this, you didn't do that. You got off track. You You know, we needed the sequence of that story, and we lost track of what you were doing. And we're still together after 35 years. So who was your first reader?
Well, my wife Brenda is a poet, so, I guess earlier on I was reading her work. She was reading my work, but we don't really do a lot of that anymore. I think, we
Goes
both,
to the publisher.
yeah,
Okay.
we've just sort of decided that in the end, you're the final arbiter. It doesn't really come down to what somebody else says in terms of how you feel about your writing. And so then you just go with it from there.
I came up with an idea for a mystery series. Well, it was going to be one book anyways. 1940, set in Eaton's, because that was my background in Eaton's, and I fleshed it out, and I was here, and I was there with it, and I went to Greg Shilliday, and I had a cup of coffee, and I wove my magic around him, and he said, "That's good, Ron. Now, why don't you go away and write something?" And here we are at that. So, gentlemen, we are in a bookstore. So, before we leave or turn it over, the chance to autograph copies here, what are you reading these days?
Oh,
Please don't say medical journals.
no. Right now, so the book that I'm reading at the moment isn't fiction, but it's sort of research. It's by a journalist with the New Republic. His name's Jacob Silverman. It's called Gilded Rage, and it's about tech bros. No surprise, and it's fantastic. But the last great bit of fiction I read, it's an older series. It was recommended over and over, and I never read it. It's the Gorman Gast trilogy by Mervyn Peake, and it's an astonishing trilogy with prose unlike any that I've ever read, and I've been thinking about it for months now. So whenever someone asks me what have you read, what are you reading, I always want to mention that. I don't feel like many people read it here in Canada. It's a beautiful series.
There have been
and funny.
quite a variety of editions of it, and there was more attention paid a few years back, and then it goes silent again, but I'm sure that's still in print at least, which is always
Yes.
one of the yardsticks, right? It's still in print.
Yes, and if you can find it with his illustrations,
Yeah.
he's an artist as well, and they're awesome. It's fantastic.
Bizarre.
Bizarre, very bizarre.
David, what are you reading?
Well, I'm finding it harder and harder to find new material that really grabs me, that I really find I want to read. I don't read as much as I used to read. But I also find that I am rereading books and parts of books. So I've got lots of books laying around. I'm going to pick up a book and look through it and say, well, what did I underline when I read this book? Why did I underline that part?
Because you were a lot younger, and at the time something else was on. Yes,
Yeah,
sure.
so I'm rereading parts of a book called Denial of Death right now, which is a book by Ernest Becker.
Okay.
It's a fascinating book. I highly recommend this book. He was sort of a big fan of a man named Otto Rank. Otto Rank wrote a book called Art and Artist. And it was the whole dynamic of what is the relationship between the artist and the art they create.
Okay.
A deep dive, deep psychological dive.
Well, as we've learned from David's book, the blacksmith who makes those twisted things that never satisfies him, that he hauls out in the stone boat elsewhere. Something happens with those towards the end of the book that at first surprises you, and then of course it doesn't at all. So now, any questions from the audience for our two authors? What's your favorite color? That's all right. Leave it at that. Yep, here we are.
For those of us who don't know what a stone boat is, am I saying that right?
It's a sled, very low to the ground on two runners. And the runners often have a steel rail along the bottom of them. It slides along the ground. You use it to haul very heavy stuff around it and maybe have a hard time lifting up onto a wagon or a truck or whatever. So, if you are out in the field and there are rocks in the field that you gotta get off there, so they don't break your farm machinery, you take the stones and you put them on the sled, and it sometimes is referred to as a stone boat. And where we live here, you can go out into the countryside, especially if you go to the inner lake area where the land has got a lot of rocks and stone. You can see piles and banks and lines of rocks all along people's fields. And those have all been picked up, put on a stone boat, hauled off the field to make the field more workable. So a stone boat is, something that played an important history in the early days.
Yeah, one more question. What happened to your hand and how does it relate to the book?
Exactly. That was gonna be my first question, but I thought, let it go.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty honest. Well, I have Dupuytren's contracture, and I just had surgery a couple of weeks ago. That was my 8th surgery. My hands don't stretch out fully anymore. But this thing was so bad, I had to get it done because it was like I couldn't even function anymore. And so, yeah, definitely, totally, like the opening of that book is me verbalizing, expressing a little bit of what that feels like and what that looks like and what that experience is. Yeah.
Have you been to any demonstrations and tried to throw something at somebody?
Not recently,
Good.
not that I'll admit to. I'm just kidding.
Last questions then? Well,
All right.
thank you all for coming.
Of course, yeah, definitely. So yeah, we're gonna move along to the signing portion of this evening, which is gonna be right over here on my right. Feel free to have a copy signed before you pay for it, just so long as you don't leave without paying it. We do appreciate it. Thank you again to Radiant Press for making this evening a reality. Of course, to Ron Robinson for hosting tonight. And then to our 2 writers, David Elias and Ben Zalkind.
Thank you.
Very well.